Stand. Call to order the Avon Town Council meeting for February 23rd, 2023. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Julie, would you mind taking a roll call, please?
Robert Pope.
Present.
Tim Roberts.
Present.
Steve Eisenbarth.
Present.
Don Loudon.
Present.
Greg Zuzen.
We have a quorum. Thank you, Julie. First item on the agenda is the consent agenda to include the check register for this meeting, February 4th work session, our February 9th work session meeting minutes, and our February 9th council meeting minutes. Any discussion, questions?
I reviewed it. Everything seems in order. I'd like to make a motion that we accept as presented.
We have a first.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Julie, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Steve Eisenbarth.
4.
Don Loudon.
4.
Tim Roberts.
4.
Robert Pope.
4. Next item on the agenda is the first of 2 public comment opportunities. You may comment on items on the agenda that are not a public hearing or a matter within the council's jurisdiction. Please come forward to the microphone, state your name and address, and limit your time to 3 minutes. Seeing no rush, we'll close that section of public comment, move on to council comment and liaison reports. Ms. Loudon.
I attended the school leadership update luncheon, which was held over at Sycamore Elementary. Got an update on that from our superintendent, Scott Wyndham, and attended the chamber board meeting last Friday, and nothing really to report on that. Not a lot, just a review and trying to get things ready. And then went to the crumble cookie grand opening, our ribbon cutting. So
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
I had the pleasure last week attending the Police Merit Board meeting. It was actually a education for myself to learn. We had 3 officers that were given commendations and awards, and learning from Chief Stoops and his staff that those particular items go to the Florida Museum, and those gentlemen are recognized forever in memoriam at that museum. So I thought that was a pretty unique and amazing thing that we do for our officers. So thanks Chief Stoops for that. And that is all I have.
That's all. That's it. Mr. Eisenbarth.
The only thing I can say is I've been reporting on traffic signals, which fortunately are not ours, that have been out. But I don't have anything else.
Crumble cookie, community leaders, business luncheon. Other than that, nothing additional to report. So we're gonna make it an easy one tonight, guys. First new business item, Reagan Logistics LOI. Are we including these together, the LOI and the agreement, or kind of looking at them separately?
You should really look at them separately. It is essentially the same thing. That's what I'll kind of give you a little background. This is a little unusual. Normally, you guys wouldn't have the LOI, the agreement, and the bond ordinance all in the same agenda. But I think, as you all know, Tim, this will be a little new to you, but we've actually been working on this. This is a developer purchase bond for the DRG project, which is Ronald Reagan Parkway, 100 South and 200 South. It's the 2 buildings on the west-hand side of Ronald Reagan. One's a 700,000 square foot building. The other one's a 300,000 square foot building. And we've actually been working with them for a while. We had an agreement with them due to their financing structure. It got delayed. And so we kind of had to go through and renegotiate a new LOI. And so this has kind of been going on for a while. I think the council's known for a long time that this was coming. It was just a matter of time. And it's kind of finally worked its way through the process. You'll know on these developer purchase bonds, the value to us is that the taxpayers of Avon aren't putting any money out to it. It's basically being guaranteed by the developer. This one's a little different because they've asked for a third party to build it, which has kind of mucked up some of the financing. And so it may look a little different than what you guys have seen in the past in terms of some of the interest rates and the discounting and capitalized interest, because some of those were demands of the third party. And so just a little bit of background on this in terms of what we've done. We didn't change our deal to DRG. We basically said, this is the cost of the money, and the town's total investment was X. And then they said they had a third party coming in. We said, hey, that's great. You can use a third party. We committed this much. So what the developer has done is, in order to get a third party to buy it, he's having to discount the bond, meaning that he's basically going to get less money at the end. And he's also being required to pay capitalized interest. So again, to us, we don't care. It's the same investment for us. And that's why you see some things in there that look a little unusual. In the end, what happens is the developer, instead of getting $2.8 million back, he's only getting $2.1 million back. So the delay that has gotten us to this point has essentially, he's had to take a loss on some of that money. So again, this is, I think, in their best interest as well. They're still getting $2.1 million reimbursed. The redevelopment commission has pledged the TIF to repay the bond. The EDC did take their action as well last night, and they approved the bond in form. And I think you guys had a copy of that in your packets as well. So kind of all of this has come, and this is actually the last step in the process. If the town council approves the LOI in the project agreement and the bond ordinance, then currently we have it scheduled for a bond closing on March 14th. And so, again, a little unusual. You have the LOI. Normally, the LOI is the business terms of the deal. And normally we do that 60 days before we actually get to a project agreement. And we do that so that the attorneys can kind of work it out. But we've all kind of said, here's the business side of it. Because this has kind of been renegotiated, they've kind of all got crunched together. So the DRG LOI is just the business terms. Then the project agreement is all the legal language that our attorneys have drafted and that their attorneys have agreed to, with all the business terms from the LOI in it as well. And so again, they're basically stating the same thing. One just has legal language and one doesn't. Does that do that justice?
Perfect.
Okay. Happy to answer any questions. We do need you to take them separately, but they are essentially the same thing.
Okay. Any questions for Ryan or staff?
I like the timeline that shows it coming up in January that they're going to, move ahead with it. Goes pretty quick after that, so that's good.
Dan, I saw you shaking your head, but I want to make sure I ask. This is a unique situation. This thing is sort of being done in flight, if you will. You've double checked, thumbs up, or this meets your standard. We're a bit safe here.
Yes, even better. Heather James from Ice Miller has been involved, our bond counsel. And so the team of John, Taylor, and Ryan, and Heather, and Mitchell, and Anna have all been involved throughout the whole process. There has been a lot of give and take with this third party, which has made it a longer process and some terms. But yeah, we have negotiated all these terms. We've vetted them. And again, Heather James, your bond counsel, has also approved these documents. And so we work together. It seems like forever, I would say, but we've worked a long time. But yes, all the documents are in a place that protects us, and that's my concern. And again, I recommend that you approve the LOI, the agreement, and the bond ordinance.
And then Greg is not here, but I know at the introduction of this, he was concerned about early payoff penalty. Now I know that has changed. I want to make sure that that's asked on the record. Was that portion removed? Will we have any penalty early payment of this bond, repayment to this bond?
Yeah, I'll cover that. Greg did bring up three things at the redevelopment commission meeting. The first one was, if you look at the analysis done by Financial Solutions Group, it looks like in 2024 that there's not sufficient revenue to cover the payments, but the payments in 2024 are capitalized interest. So if you actually look in the funding piece, there is a capitalized interest fund, and that money will actually be paid from the capitalized interest fund, not from the TIF dollars. So that issue goes away. So that was one question. The second question that Greg had was, he asked on Exhibit B, it had 25 years, and we did modify it actually in the document that you guys will sign. We did clarify that with Heather, and it's We did leave the 25 years because that says up to 25 years, which is the length of the bond. So we cleaned up the language a little bit, but it is going to be 25 years. Greg's question was, should it be 10? Because the term of the bond was only 10 years. And then do you remember what his
Well,
third?
25 years, no, but 25 years is the term of the allocation area. I know Ryan, he knew what he meant, but he said, and the bond repayment term is 10 years.
Yeah,
And I agree with Heather. We always refer to the dynastic term, the 25 years, because it might not be that, but that's what the statute says. I mean, the repayment year is 10 years, but we're talking about two different things there, and I think that's what we tried to clarify for Greg.
And the third one was repayment, early payoff.
Yeah, and that was changed in the original agreement, even in the one that we introduced at your guys' last council meeting, it had that it didn't have an early redemption. This one does show that at year 7, we have the option to be able to redeem it. So that was corrected as well.
And that's the actual redemption amount?
We can do an early redemption, meaning we could choose at our discretion, if we have enough money in the fund, we could pay off the bond at 7 years. They didn't want to do that. They wanted us to make sure it ran the term to the 10 years. But that was changed. So now we do have the option to redeem it now at year 7. And that becomes the redevelopment commission's decision and the council's, do we want to pay off the bond early or not? And as we get to that point, Greg will always do an analysis and say,
Greg Garitas.
Greg Garitas, our financial advisor, would do an analysis and say, is it in the town's best interest to do that? And then he would recommend whether we do that or not.
No, sounds good.
Any further questions?
So
or
it's actually
discussion?
3.
His concerns, yeah, there was, thanks for the reminder. There was 3. That was the most important one that I remembered. If no further questions, would anyone like to make a motion?
And the first motion would be on the LOI.
Correct.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Reagan Logistics LOI as presented.
I'll second. Oh, all right, I'll second. I'll grab on that one. Julie, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Tim Roberts,
4.
Next item is the Reagan Logistics Agreement. I feel like we've already gone to this, so we'll just move to if there's any questions. Any further questions for staff? If not, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the Reagan Logistics Agreement
As presented.
as presented.
I'll second that as well. Julie, would you take a roll call vote, please?
okay, Robert Pope,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Tim Roberts,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Next item on the agenda is,
Can I ask you a question first?
sure, shoot, John.
If they pay the loan off in 7 years, we can continue.
Hey, John, turn your mic on. Oh.
Thank you very much. We can continue to collect that TIF, correct?
Yeah, those two things aren't tied together. We will collect the TIF, capture the TIF, and it can be used for any purpose that's
I
authorized.
just want to make sure that they understood that.
Yeah, we will continue to do that unless the RDC were to take action to
Dissolve.
get rid of the TIF. I doubt they will, but they could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next item on the agenda, Resolution 2023-03, declare economic revitalization area for Ryder. And I assume you're speaking this one, Joe.
Yep, this is what I talked about maybe 2 meetings ago, that Ryder was signing a lease with the Chicago Industrial on the 880,000 square foot building, at least 200 and some thousand square feet of it. And that we were going to offer them an abatement on their personal property, and we offered them as we did with the other tenant, 5 years, 50%. And so this is just a declared resolution for that. You have at least the front page of the statement of benefits. It's 50 jobs with annual payroll, 2.75 million.
The average job hour rate.
Probably in the
Spectacular, I think is around.
about 22, 24, yeah. With some executive level positions making 120 to 150.
Pardon me, the job template, like it explains pretty well.
Yeah.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
if I just may, I want to, in this resolution, you're asked really to make two important findings. The RDC has already made findings, the EDC has made findings, and this resolution, you're all, what the two important findings are pretty simple, but one, you are required to make a finding that the development's not going to occur here unless we do something, which is, again, usually the case. And then secondly, this type of designation as a ERA is not available for retail businesses. So they're finding in the resolution that this is not a retail business. This is a logistics business. And so those are the two important findings that you as a group are making. And each group that with these things are going to have to make the same findings as to those. And then I also noted that just for the record, it's an estimated $10.5 million equipment and then some IT for a total of $12 million investment and a annual payroll of over 2.75 million, which is pretty significant.
And at this point then, excuse this, would Ryder or Chicago Industrial continue with this development if we weren't to offer this abatement? Is that a good way to ask that question? There we go.
They've said they would not come here if there was not an incentive, but the incentive by the state of Indiana, and the state of Indiana is the one that's in the deal. They're putting this on the table for this project. And so that's we're trying to really come here to the state.
Then the other one is a viable location for a retail.
No, this really structured for distribution.
I would agree.
Yeah,
Further-
I have a question. If the state's involved, are they also getting an incentive?
They give incentives after we tell them what we're going to put on the table. They never come to us and say, this, and this, what are you giving? Because they're the ones that will ultimately make the deal.
you look at the number of jobs that they have, and yes, the hourly wage, when you look at the first one, it doesn't look real impressive, but if you look at the management side, what they have in the 100,000 plus, they're doing well. And then to add these jobs and to bring these jobs to us is very good. And just to finding we mentioned, it's not a retail business. This is bringing in real income to our tax base, and it's going to help us quite a bit. So.
The other thing, state incentives that the state does in a project, but the local is not putting incentives because they're taking state tax money from our state to put into our town. But if our town says, we're not going to put any money in this, then the state will say, we'll find another place for the project. So.
That's why it wasn't, I was asking, like, is there a match or is there a formula?
No,
since
that's-
the state's involved.
They could have had a conversation and the state has said to them, the total package will be a little over $1 million. They'll giving, and they'll.
Dan Clary, this is to move forward the resolution so we can do our due diligence. Each department can do their due diligence. Nothing set in stone. This is just a motion to move forward.
Well, yes, I'd say yes. Yeah, this is kind of the first step of the process, an important step, but yes. And then it sends the signal to the state and to the developer that we can go forward. Yeah,
Understood.
it's very important, but before you can grant tax abatements, before you can do these things, you have to take this step and designate it as an economic revitalization area. If you don't do that, you can't take the next steps. And so, yes, this is just the first step. And it does, I think the staff has done a really good job of gathering as much information as they have now and getting it to you guys so you can kind of see the bigger picture, the anticipated ask, and details about about what they plan to do in the future. And so we're still at that, what people plan to do in the future stage, but this is what we need to do to get that rolling.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
When are they looking to occupy?
August, maybe? Late July, August?
No other questions?
That's good. That was good.
No, good.
No further questions. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Absolutely. Resolution 2023-3, I'd like to declare an economic revitalization area for Ryder as presented.
Second.
Would your motion be to approve that?
To approve it.
Thank you.
Approve it, sorry. Thank you.
I have a first and a second. Julie, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Don Loudon,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Tim Roberts.
4.
Thanks, John. Next item on the agenda is final reading ordinance 2022-34 Oxford Park annexation. And I assume you're speaking on this one, Ryan.
Dan and I will probably take it together, but this is actually, I know we've been working on this annexation for, gosh, I don't know, maybe a year now at this point, probably even longer than that. The annexation, probably a year. And we started talking with the neighborhood probably almost 2-3 years ago. So it's kind of been a long process. So this is actually the last step in the process, which is well, I shouldn't say it's the last step. It's the last step before you guys as a council to actually consider it and actually adopt it. If the council does in fact adopt it, then we have to send notices to the property owners, and there's still a 90-day remonstrance period. And if enough people don't sign the remonstrance petitions within 90 days, then the annexation becomes effective. And I believe it's May 31st is the effective date. So the staff does have quite a bit of work still to do. We have to make the remonstration petition available for people to sign here every day from 8 to 4:30 over that 90-day period. We also have to hold 5 meetings at an alternative government area, which we're doing at the White Oak Professional Development Space. And so it has to be after hours. So it's from 5 to 9 p.m. and we have to make staff available for them to be able to sign the petition. So we've coordinated all of that and we're ready to go if the council makes the decision to approve it. And alternative, I think a couple in the ordinance from what was actually in your packet. So I'll let Dan address that.
Yeah, so this ordinance is just slightly different, just with technical things, but this is what we call a Section 5 annexation, which is a voluntary annexation where more than 50% of the owners or owners of 75% of the assessed value have requested the annexation. And again, if you go back to October when this started, this is a voluntary annexation under Section 5. It's not a super voluntary annexation under 5.1. Which would mean 100%. And so that's one of the changes from your packet. It was just it was a carryover from a prior ordinance. And so and then the other one was a modification of the way that you refer to your election districts. And so whether you say ward or district, and here we say wards, so it's corrected, did not say District 1, but say Ward 1 at the bottom of page 2. So there were just some minor changes. We, of course, want to be right, 100% right, if we can be every time. So this is the corrected ordinance. And this is final reading.
Again, we've had this in front of us a few times, and I think we've asked a ton of questions about it. But last chance, any questions about this?
I have a question. So it's effective 90 days after it's recorded. Will we be recording it tomorrow? Will we be recording it next week? And how do when does the 90-day remonstration period start? Does it start the day that it's recorded or?
It starts the day that we advertise it, which is because of the way the paper works is March 2nd. So we'll get it to the paper on Monday. It'll be advertised next Thursday. And so then it's 90 days after March 2nd.
So we have spring break coming up in there.
Yep.
So there'll still be someone here
Yep,
that
the
will
town hall's still
know
open.
what to
And
do.
and another requirement, not only will we publish notice of adoption of the ordinance, but also that notice will be mailed to all of the landowners in the territory. The statute is very, very specific about all the things, and Ryan's right, there's a lot of work left for the staff. And in September, October, the staff and your legal team worked together to put a whole flow chart, step by step by step by step. We're on number, what, 46? But we have like 12 steps left. So we have to record it. We have to file it with the clerk, voter registration. There are lots of things we have to do. But I can assure you that your staff's ready to go and they'll do what they need to do. And because the trigger date starts on publication, that's why it's not 90 days from tomorrow.
That was a good one. Any further questions? If not, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the 2022-34 Oxford Park annexation.
I will second. Julie, will you take a roll call vote, please?
Tim Roberts,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Excellent. Next item, final reading ordinance 2023-01, remote work policy. Dan, I assume?
Yes. Yes, so as I mentioned during introduction, this ordinance establishes and formalizes a remote work policy so that there can be a structure and accountability with any employees who work remotely. And so this new policy, you see beginning at page 1 of the ordinance at the bottom, we work with the staff to come up with how that would be addressed and managed. And there needs to be accountability in remote work and need to be some rules, and then we need to communicate that to employees if there are any remote workers, though, that everybody knows what is going on. Part of this is just good management, but also with governments, we have ghost employment rules. We have to be careful not to pay people when they don't work. So this policy establishes some accountability, record keeping, that sort of thing. I think it's Ryan asked for it, and I thought it was a very good idea to have a policy rather than kind of do it by just from the seat of our pants. Yeah. So this will be great. And we may find that as we practice it, it needs to be tweaked and whatnot, but this gives us a good foundation to move forward with this. And this is also second reading.
Any questions for staff? Nope. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve 2023-01 remote work policy, second read.
I'll second that.
Nice. We have a first and a second. Julie, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Tim Roberts,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Robert Pope,
4. Next item on the agenda, final reading ordinance 2023-02, establishing a public safety local income tax fund. This is Julie.
Yes, your county income tax council has adopted a public safety income tax. And that's good news. That means we have revenue, and we already have revenue, but Julie needs somewhere to put it. And so the state requires us to create this fund so that its use can be monitored, and we can represent to the State Board of Accounts each year that we are using that money consistent with our ordinance and our appropriations. And so this is kind of a new thing, but the ordinance itself is really simple. It just merely establishes the fund. It says where the money will be coming from, how it will be used, and the fact that these ordinances, this is not general fund. This will stand by itself. And you'll be able to then look at it, essentially the accounting for it anytime you want, and so will the state. This is also second reading.
Any questions? What's that?
It's about time.
About time.
Yeah.
Chief is very excited about this one.
Yeah, it's about time.
Anything for public safety.
And Brian's not here. He's already got, we've got to throw the joke out there. He's already, he's got eyes on the money. That's right. He's already got it spent. If there are no questions, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the 2023-02 establishing a public safety local income tax fund.
I'll second. We have a first and a second. Julie, would you mind taking a roll call vote, please?
Don Loudon,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Tim Roberts,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Last ordinance, final reading ordinance 2023-03 bond ordinance Reagan Logistics.
This ordinance approves the parameters of your bond for the Reagan Logistics project, which we've talked so much about. And it also, importantly, approves the related documents, which are the trust indenture, the financing agreement, the bond purchase agreement, and the financing agreement. And so this ordinance is the last step in the process for approvals. And as you know, the financing agreement just further lays out the terms of the financing itself. The trust indenture is our agreement with Huntington National Bank. It's kind of an assurance to the developer that we will actually use TIF funds, collect them, and use it to repay this bond and not use them for any purpose. And in order to provide that assurance, we're going to involve a third party who's going to get that money and actually make those payments for us. The bond purchase agreement authorizes the bonds to be sold and defines those terms. And so these documents, in addition to the ordinance that you would be approving, are all the final steps that we would need in order to close that bond on March 14th, as Ryan mentioned.
Any questions for staff? And this is final reading as well. If no questions, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, 2023-03, that we accept with all the amendments and attachments here as presented.
We have a first.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Julie, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Tim Roberts,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Robert Pope.
4. Next item on the agenda, legal counsel report. Mr. Taylor.
Yes, I'm happy to report to you that we've reached a settlement in the Glover case, and I know it's been emailed to you, but Anna Crone is also passing it out to you again. It's exactly the same words that you've seen before in these settlement agreements about a month ago. The amount is different, but you can see the structure is exactly the same. We are, again, your insurance carrier has settled it. The settlement will save the town a lot of money, and we can put that behind us. And I would recommend approval of the agreement so that we can wrap up that settlement and have the case dismissed.
And treat it as payroll.
Part of it, yeah, you'll see on page 2 that the settlement amount is broken down into thirds. A third of it is treated as compensation, lost compensation. A third of it is treated as non-compensatory damages, and a third of it is for attorney's fees. So it's kind of that same structure we saw before. That's a very common practice. The parties negotiated that, but that's a very common practice in these sorts of cases. So we assisted in that negotiation. We're comfortable with that. That really has to do with just how these funds are going to be treated for income tax.
Thank you.
Anyone like to make a motion?
Make a motion that we approve the Glover settlement as presented.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Julie, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Don Loudon,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Tim Roberts.
4.
Next item, was that the end of legal comment from you, Mr. Taylor?
No further comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, the second of 2 public comment opportunities. If you'd like to speak, please come forward, state your name and address, and limit your time to 3 minutes. No one come forward, close that section of public comment. Second opportunity, council comment. Anyone? Nope. Seeing some shaking heads, so council calendar. Ryan?
Our next meeting is March 9th. We'll have a work session beforehand, so 5:30 PM for the work session and town council meeting at 7 PM.
Meeting adjourned.